Hey guys, and welcome to another episode of Suit Up, the Warframe Frame Review series. Today we're taking a look at the latest addition to the Prime family, one of the oldest Tenno in the game, finally given the golden tint, Ash Prime. Now the original Ash had somewhat of a cult following, but outside of that he was probably the Warframe I saw least in any group that I ever joined. However, since the Prime was released, he was probably the one that had, I'd say, probably the most amount of hype surrounding him. But why is that? Well, the Prime keeps a few of the base Ash stats the same, with a pretty decent 450 health at level 30, and the average 150 energy at 30. And it receives reasonable buffs in other areas, such as an increase from 300 to 375 shield at level 30, a sprint speed increase from 1.15 to 1.2, and the armor being over doubled from 65 to 150. But other than that, the only buff the Prime gets over the standard Ash is the fact that it can take advantage of the energy boost from the Void Death Orbs. The standard frame doesn't have any passive abilities, so the Prime doesn't get any either. So that is also something that cannot be taken into account when looking at the hype surrounding this frame. So perhaps it's that people have forgotten really that Ash existed, and the promise of a Prime and further buffs combined with his skill set that got even people that were previously, disliking Ash to get on that particular hype train. Well, to be able to see to that, let's have a look at his skill set and see what Ash and his Prime counterpart can offer. His first ability is Shuriken, where he launches a spinning blade of pain, dealing high damage and impaling enemies to walls. It's a pretty simple ability that when cast will throw out 2 shurikens, each dealing 500 slash damage, with a 100% chance to proc the slash. As with most abilities like this, it's affected by power strength, increasing the initial damage of the shuriken. However, since the bleed proc is going to cause a damage over time of 35% of the initial damage per tick for 7 ticks over 6 seconds, that bypasses armor and shields, the increase in initial damage also affects this bleed proc as well, making this easily one of the highest damaging first abilities in the game. Shuriken also often hits the head of the enemy, and that adds to the already pretty fantastic damage over time damage by doubling the bleed proc from that 35% of the original to 70% of the original, meaning that those headshots really do count, and it is absolutely paramount to hit those. I absolutely love Shuriken. It feels like one of the most ninja moves that any of the frames have, and the damage is actually enough to take it fairly far into the game, unlike a lot of first abilities. Now it does come with a Syndicate augment, Seeking Shuriken. What this does is that Shuriken will reduce enemy armor by 70% for 8 seconds at max level. Now this is pretty simple and is an attempt to give Ash a role within a team. The thing about this augment is that honestly it's really only suitable in certain situations. Firstly, if you want to go a more sort of gun focused Ash build and want to strip armor from a target before shooting them, or secondly, if you want to remove armor from targets for teammates to shoot. The thing is that in most groups, especially running missions where this augment's going to even be needed, you're going to be running corrosive projection anyway, and that's the augment is kind of wasted. And in addition to that, when you're solo with Ash, every single one of his abilities relies on finisher damage anyway, which ignores armor in the first place. So once again, the augment is kind of useless. Now I know there are actually quite a few people out there that like this augment, and probably won't like what I've just said about it. It's really personal preference, but I know for sure that this is not one that I personally would consider on any of my Ash builds. The second ability Ash can rely on is Smokescreen, where Ash drops a smoke bomb that will stun enemies and obscures their vision, rendering Ash invisible for a short time. Once again, it's a pretty simple ability, but a useful one at the same time. When he throws down his smoke bomb, he will go invisible for 8 seconds, which can be affected by duration, and will stagger targets for a short duration up to a range of 10 meters, which can be affected by power range. Now there's a couple of very important things to remember about Smokescreen. Firstly, enemies will continue to attack Ash's last known location, so use it and move immediately. It also does not make Ash silent, so non-silent weapons fired under Smokescreen will cause enemies to attack the location of the sound. And finally, unlike Loki's Invis, you cannot use the ability in the air, so you must be on the ground to be able to use it. So always plan ahead for that if you're focusing on a stealth Ash build. However, much like Loki's Invis, it does open stealth damage multipliers. so it can be used to devastating effect if you go for a very melee focused build on the frame. Smoke Bomb is one of those abilities that you either love it or you hate it. You can obviously build for duration, and since you can get a duration of around 17 seconds with max duration, compared to the 30 or more from your Loki, meaning that you really need to think about it when you play a lot more. Especially since going on a duration build, you often sacrifice a lot of tank for it, which on Loki with your 30 seconds of invis is fine, but with just 17, it requires being a lot more switched on and paying attention. One mistake at high enough level and it will get you killed. Like Shuriken, Smokescreen also comes with an augment, and like Shuriken, it's actually a pretty simple one. When you use Smokescreen, you also cloak your allies within 5 meters for 8 seconds. Now, while the duration can be modded for, the range cannot, and the range just absolutely kills this augment dead. 5 meters is not even vaguely close to being useful. Imagine grouping up for every 15, 16, 17 seconds, pretty much having to stack up on top of, right on top of each other. It's not realistic at all, and it's a hindrance to gameplay rather than a help. Honestly, I steer well clear of this augment, at least until it gets a much needed buff, because right now it's absolutely awful. It's a shame too, because it had a lot of promise. And the third ability that Ashe has at his disposal is pretty much another extremely simple one, which is Teleport, where Ashe teleports towards the target, bringing him into melee range and enemies vulnerable to finishers. The description pretty much does exactly what it says on the tin. Ashe can teleport to allies, enemies, cryopods, mobile defense terminals, making this a pretty reasonable maneuverability skill. However, if the target is an enemy, it will open up the enemy to a finisher attack, really allowing focused picking off of targets, the targets of opportunity, your heavy targets. Bombards, you can do it on the Ancients, things like that. And it really supplements a melee focused build for Ashe. The range of this ability is the only thing that can be modded for. Everything else is focused on melee weapons. In all honesty, this is literally it when it comes to this skill. It's nothing more complicated than that. And so, onto Ashe's pièce de résistance. His fourth ability, Blade Storm. Pretty much Ashe goes on a rampage, teleporting to and destroying nearby enemies. This ability once again doesn't have a ton of stuff to it, but what it does effectively. Ashe and 2 clones teleport to enemies, slashing them with wrist-mounted blades, attacking 18 enemies within 25 meters of the selected target. Ashe himself can attack a maximum of 17 times, dealing 2,000 finisher damage, ignoring shields and armor. It's also much like Shuriken, so it has a 100% chance for the bleed proc, dealing 35% of the initial damage per tick for 7 ticks over 6 seconds. Now, because the ability is all finisher damage, it can also proc Arcane Trickery, which can help survivability at higher levels, especially if you manage to get it to proc reliably. The damage itself is affected not only by power strength, Steel Charge now affects it as well, and even melee combo multipliers. Really mean that if you can keep that combo going, you can really make Ashe into a very good melee specialist. When the Blade Storm is activated, affected enemies are marked red for your allies to see, and although they can shoot the red marked enemies, if you are currently attacking that unit, or one of your clones is on top of it, that unit is unable to be shot by your allies. Now, in terms of Blade Storm scaling, the fact that all its damage ignores armor entirely is absolutely fantastic. And if a unit survives the initial Blade Storm, Ashe can return to that unit and attack it again, provided that a 17 target limit hasn't been reached. Now, this means that Blade Storm really can go a lot higher than it sounds like it can, especially since most straight up damage powers drops off insanely as the enemy level starts to increase. But Blade Storm can keep on going, especially if you use the augment that it has, Rising Storm, which pretty much increases the duration of the melee combo counter, allowing for a little bit of leeway between attacking your final target and attacking the next one, yet keeping that melee combo going. Now, honestly, I never thought I'd be considering this mod. It sounds like one of those ones I didn't think was going to be that helpful. However, at a higher level, where Blade Storm's starting to struggle to kill efficiently, you can actually really keep up that 3 times multiplier, and it's absolutely fantastic. It's an insane boost to your damage, really allowing your Blade Storm to carry on doing that damage, even when, by all rights, it should have stopped doing efficient damage way before. It's an augment I truly did not understand the point of before. However, with testing and with playing with it, I would absolutely recommend this. Okay, so let's move on to starting to mod Ashe Prime. Now, it does come with 2 Vs and a dash as standard. However, we're going to add 2 former to this. I've only got 3 on here because I was experimenting with builds. We're going to add a D, and we're going to change the polarity to a dash on the aura. Now, the reason for that is, I mean, at the time I did this, the steel charge didn't actually affect the blade storm at all. But even now, I still would go for energy siphon over the over steel charge. I much prefer being able to use that energy siphon. It's just so much more useful. Plus, if you end up playing in a group, you could just stick on corrosive projection. You could use loot detector, sorry, for if you're doing loot runs, things like that. So, for me, the dash is way more versatile than anything else, but personally, I just love energy siphon. Now, for this build, we're going to be focusing really on this Rising Storm mod. So we've got Prime Continuity and Narrow-Minded on there to really push up that duration. We've got Transient Fortitude on here to push up the power strength to keep the Blade Storm going. Obviously, we've got Constitution, which is going to help with knockdown recovery, so you're going to get up quicker. Plus, it's also going to add a little bit more to that duration. We've got Stretch, which is going to help for making sure that we can get into that Blade Storm that little bit further. And then, obviously, we got Fleeting and Streamline to make it as cheap as possible. And then the Rising Storm Augment, which is going to mean that our melee combo, especially when you combine it with reduced duration, is really going to last for quite a long time. And you're going to be able to keep up that 3 times combo so much easier, especially at those really high levels. Now, if you don't want to go Rising Storm, you can go with a more traditional sort of tank setup. And once again, we'll go with Energy Siphon. I was using this for loot runs a little bit earlier, as well as with the wrong Intensify. So we got Transient Fortitude and Intensify to really push up the power strength to keep the Blade Storm going, as well as the Shuriken. We've got Quick Thinking to make sure that we aren't going to die quite so easily. Prime Flow, which is going to work with the Quick Thinking. Vitality to give us the health to work with the Rage, which is going to give us the energy to put into Prime Flow, which then will be used by Quick Thinking if we drop to 2 health. And then we've got Fleeting and Streamline, which is going to really, really drive down the cost of every single one of those abilities. So do I think that Ashe is worth the time, effort and resources to max it? And the answer there is only if you enjoyed playing the original Ashe. Look, at the end of the day, if you didn't enjoy the original frame, there's no way you're going to enjoy this version of him at all. The stat boosts are nowhere near enough to really take him much further than the non-prime. In fact, the only real difference is the way he looks, which personally, I absolutely love the way he looks. He looks absolutely epic, easily one of the best looking frames in the game for me. Ashe is arguably the true ninja of the game. Every single one of his abilities are traditional in every sense. Shuriken, smoke bombs, hidden blades. You can't get more ninja than that. But realistically, he's not a team frame. He's got no real crowd control, he's got no abilities that buff teammates to help out in situations. But is there anything wrong with that? In my eyes, no, not at all. Look, not every single frame needs to be a team player. Ashe appeals most to those solo players, because his abilities really just focus on his damage, his survivability, his kills. Okay, he's got augments that could theoretically help out in team situations, but the ones that don't just affect Ashe, to me, are just weak, and aren't really worth the mod slot. Am I saying he's got no place in any team? No, not at all, not in the slightest. In fact, a well-played Ashe can kill effectively even up until about an hour in Tower 3 survival, and can be an asset to the team in kills alone. Just don't expect much in the way of the crowd control. Now, in terms of taking Ashe and his prime further, I invested very heavily into a Horus Kubrow for that extra cloak, the extra damage, and the other advantages that having a Kubrow can bring. I'd say it's definitely a worthwhile investment for those that really want to take Ashe to the limit. I also put on 2 full sets of the Arcane Trickery, one onto the helmet, one onto the Sandana, to give a 20% chance to get 20 seconds of invisibility on those melee finishes. Now this can also make or break Ashe, and really pushes him into the realms of permanent invis especially when you take into account that Horus Kubrow and the smoke screen as well. It can be a massive boost to the survivability of the frame, especially when solo. Now, I was going to talk a bit about Bladestorm and fourth abilities in general. However, I think this video's gone on long enough, and there is something I really want to get off my chest about these types of abilities in Warframe currently. So I think I'm going to do a video of its own all about that. Also, much like the other new Prime videos, drop locations will be in the description of the video below. Now, apologies for how long this video took to get out. PC issues really curbed my ability to actually make any videos, but I am back up and running, ready and raring to go, so onwards and upwards. So, Ash Prime, he looks absolutely epic, and in general, he's pretty good fun to play, albeit not the greatest team player ever. If you like the original Ash, you'll love the Prime. If not, then this is unlikely to float your boat. As always, guys, many thanks for watching. Please remember to leave a like, subscribe, it helps me out a ton, and I shall see you in the next episode.